And you are now live.
This is Senate Appropriations, and we're going to be taking up the bill S-173. And we have Senator Clarkson here to present the bill for us. And I think basically the reason that we are had the bill referred to us is because it does create some subcommittees and some organization. And so those normally come. I think one of the first questions are, we always have, are there limitations on the number of meetings, for example, if you're doing,
Right.
if they're subject to compensation? So welcome, Senator Clarkson.
Thank you. It's great to be back with my friends in Approps. This bill is a result of the work required in the capital bill in 2020. And it updates aspects of the statutes concerning the Legislative Advisory Committee on the State House, which was convened, as you may recall, this summer to deal with the pandemic planning for how we were going to come back to the State House. And so it updates aspects of that, and it clarifies the statutorily sort of unclear working relationship between the Sergeant at Arms and the state curator. This bill, the work in 2020 set up a process for diversifying the art in the State House and required that the Legislative Advisory Committee on the State House, in consultation with the curator and others, create a plan to diversify the artwork, submit that plan to the legislative committees by March 1st. And it also required that the curator create both an acquisitions policy and an interpretive plan. The interpretive plan is well underway, but the other reports that were due back last March, in March of 21, weren't done. So the Legislative Advisory Committee set up a subcommittee this summer to deal with that. So I served on that with Senator Hardy and several others, Steve Perkins, who runs the Historical Society, and John. Anyway, the bill in front of you, we worked hard on. We decided we could not create a collections policy until the interpretive plan was done. So, but what we wanted to do was set up, because a key piece of this is improving oversight and accountability for the collections in the State House. And so we set up we set up one subcommittee, but we created the opportunity for the Legislative Advisory Committee on the State House to set up other subcommittees. So, for example, we're going into possibly a renovation of the State House. It would make sense that there might be a subcommittee created to deal with the initial stages of that expansion and renovation. So this bill really, in statute, we have per diem and expenses in section 1 under 652. There are the per diems for the legislators who serve on the Legislative Advisory Committee on the State House. We have reduced the number from 8 to 6 because we took it up to 8 for the pandemic planning for the State House. We're going to take it back to 6 now. And we have set up only one standing committee, the collections subcommittee, who will create with the curator a collections policy, which will go to the committee as a whole for approval. But we set up that one subcommittee of just members of the committee, and the possibility for other needs for other subcommittees. So that is really the financial ask in this bill, are the per diems for the 6 committee members and the subcommittee members. The committee, by statute, the Legislative Advisory Committee on the State House, is only required to meet twice a year, once during the session and once not. And we met quite a bit this fall. You know, I can't remember how many times we met, but we met this fall in the planning for how to come back to the State House. So all the new committee rooms out of the lounge in room 10 and 11, that was all our work that we then presented to the Joint Rules Committee and the Joint Legislative Management Committee. So that is really what this bill does. Is in statute, we already have the per diems and expenses for the committee members. this reduces the number of committee members of 6 from 8 to 6 legislators, but adds the possibility that a subcommittee would be meeting as well.
And increases the 2 to undefined number. There's no limit.
But of subcommittees, there's only one subcommittee that's set up.
No, we oftentimes, when we have committees, we have limits on how frequently they can meet. That's what I'm
Right.
asking.
We didn't.
I'm asking, Alice usually asks that question, so I'm
Ah.
asking it for her.
So we
Um,
have in statute that the Legislative Advisory Committee meets at a minimum of 2 times a year. There is no upper limit set, and I wasn't aware of one as we went into our summer and fall meetings with Alice Emmons, who chaired that.
No, I expect there was no limit on it. The question is, if we pass this and set up this structure,
Right.
and authorize the per diems, should we authorize the committee to meet up to a number of, because obviously off session, how many times would be reasonable? 8 times? Do we not address it, leave it open based on need? That's the question. So,
Right.
Senator Starr, you had your hand up? No?
So, Madam Chair.
Just that during election years, we usually try to keep that at a minimum. The longer during the regular, like this last summer, some met 10, 12 times, if not more, but on an election year, we usually shorten that up to some degree.
Well, when you have a maximum, then if people want to meet less, that's not a problem. So the question is, and the original bill had a figure of any collection acquisition in excess of 5,000, there was a review, et cetera. That all got taken out. So, so basically what we're dealing with is the clarifying the relationship with the sergeant at arms, the curator, state curator, and the legislative committee, and reducing the number from 8 to 6, and continuing authorization of the per diem, and meeting a minimum of twice a year. That would be maintained. Yeah. Okay. Yes, Senator Clarkson.
Oh, I just want to clarify that with the interpretive plan coming back to the legislature in June, my guess is the Collections Policy Committee would want to meet this year. And of course, Bobby's right. It is an election year, and we probably won't meet a lot, but my guess is we will want to be working on a collections policy to be approved at some point relatively soon by the Legislative Advisory Committee on the State House.
So the Collections Policy Committee is a subcommittee?
That's the subcommittee that's created in this bill, yes.
Okay. And on that subcommittee are a certain number of legislators designated?
No, it is up to the committee. We tried to leave it as open as possible because we haven't done it yet. So but it would be members of the committee and anyone, people who would serve in other capacities or on salaries and have, I don't know.
Well, we have our usual language. We don't pay per diems for people if they're getting compensated through their job. It's standard language.
Right.
And I'm sure Becky can tell us whether that's in there. So we have actually, we have here specifically the legislative, the State House Advisory Committee, and then underneath it as a subcommittee. Senator Sears, you have your hand up.
Yeah, I have a number of questions about this bill. I agree there should be some limits on the number of meetings, but I'm particularly concerned on page 3, line 9, starting on line 19. The chair of the committee, Sergeant at Arms, the state curator, and the president of the Friends of the Remote State House shall execute a memorandum of understanding. I don't remember giving that kind of legislative authority to the chair of a committee. Now, maybe it's done regularly. I would like to hear from Rebecca Wasserman about this section. It sounds like that would provide the chair with numerous meetings to execute a memorandum of understanding. Usually the legislature, doesn't cede its authority to one member. I find that troubling, but in terms of the number of meetings too. Secondly, I don't know if that's the chair of the committee or the chair of the subcommittee.
It's the
The
chair of the
committee.
Legislative Advisory Committee.
So the chair of the Legislative Advisory Committee is going to, on behalf of the legislature, is going to create memorandums of understanding.
In conjunction with, one of the things that's unclear is, as you know, there are many stakeholders at the State House. And this,
I'm asking Ledge Counsel if this is normal practice or if this is unusual. I know, like Joint Justice Oversight Committee, we switched the chair between the House and the Senate, and it can meet a maximum of 6 times, and this is unlimited times. And now we have a chair with executive authority.
So that's your question to Becky Wasserman in terms of the legal
Yeah.
precedent here?
Well,
Okay.
the legal precedent and whether this is, does this allow unlimited meetings for whomever the chair might be?
Okay. Well, we can deal with the putting in limits on reimbursement. The question, I think, is the sort of that delegation of authority
Yeah.
to
by
execute the
legislature.
MOU. All right. So Becky, could you speak to that question, please?
Becky Wasserman.
You just moved on my screen. You're now over.
So I'm aware where the legislature has delegated authority to the Sergeant at Arms, so the legislative branch, to execute an MOU with the executive branch, BGS, for security reasons. Sort of under similar circumstances, security policies about security in and outside of the State House and the Capitol complex. So I think that this is modeled off of that arrangement where BGS is working with the legislative branch to come up with policies about the sort of oversight and care of the State House artwork. I believe, I'm not sure if it's in an MOU, but I believe that there's something similar for parking between the legislature and the executive branch, because the Sergeant at Arms and BGS both have sort of overlapping authority in some respects with respect to parking. So that is the precedent. So the chair of the committee is executing it on behalf of the committee. I guess I'm not sure that I have seen precedent where the chair of a committee is doing that, but I think it's not for meetings. It's just for the policies with respect to the oversight of the artwork.
Senator Sears, you had otherwise
Well,
I'll move to Senator Baruch.
that answers my question. I thank you, but I'm going to oppose the bill.
I suppose, and I'm here thinking about, they could recommend, but ultimately it seemed like we have got that joint legislative management oversight committee that has, I guess the question is, do you delegate to one person or let the work and then you have.
Well, you're delegating to one person the ability to sign on behalf of the legislature. A
That's what I
memorandum
mean.
of understanding. That's the troubling part of it.
So the question is that the right structure, or should there be for the development, and which would ultimately be approved by the, I don't know, in this case, the Joint Legislative Management Committee? I'm not sure. But I guess you raised the concern, and maybe Senator Bruce, you have a follow-up to that.
Yeah, it's similar and two parts. One, the number of meetings, and one tagging on to what Dick is saying. I think it's not just whether there's precedent to create an MOU, but this would be an MOU that would develop a certain character of the State House, which is on a different order than, to my mind, parking or something like that. So I do favor the idea that we have a broader input rather than one chair writing a memorandum of understanding with stakeholders. Then in terms of the number of meetings, so the existing law has a floor but not a ceiling on the number of meetings. And over the last couple of years, they've had to do a lot of work around the pandemic and space. And I'm thankful that the committee was able to step up and do that. So I'm less concerned with the number of meetings for the committee itself. I'm more concerned with giving it the ability to create permanent subcommittees that will then themselves decide how often they will meet. It seems like we're setting up a structure that would be, in essence, self-authorizing in terms of its number of meetings, hence the amount of money it's spending for per diems. So I do think that we should, if we give the committee the power to create permanent rather than ad hoc subcommittees, we should put limits on the number of meetings for those offshoots.
Okay. Which is our standard practice, to be honest. Senator Clarkson.
Thanks. And I can appreciate those and would be happy to entertain them, because they hasn't met. It's sort of hard to figure out what work's involved. But I just have to say, Dick, it's not this is a problem that we face, which is the State House has many oversight bodies. The Sergeant at Arms is responsible for some pieces. The curator is responsible for some pieces. The Friends are responsible, and BGS is responsible for the building, and the Legislative Advisory Committee is responsible for aspects of it too. This is an attempt to actually make some progress on clarifying exactly how we work together. So it's really designed to coordinate all these policies and the oversight and the care of the State House. The curator, for example, it doesn't have a lot of input here. And that's why we're wanting to include BGS and the curator, because as you know, the curator is part of the administrative branch, the executive branch. It's really important for them to work together because they know how well they know how what needs to be done. It was our attempt to bring the stakeholders together to come up with a memorandum that they understand, they will abide by. This will be a working document for how they go forward together. And it's this opportunity in time to do this work, which has actually been needed for a while. They function on relationship. Who has done what together.
All right, Senator Sears.
My concern is with the precedent that it sets, that a single member of the legislature is able to sign memorandums of understanding that may or may not be in agreement with the majority of the legislature. And when you give that kind of authority to an individual legislator, no, we elect leaders. We elect the speaker, we elect the president pro tem. If it said that, at the direction of the committee, the chair could sign a memorandum of understanding, if it was at the direction of some other group. But you're talking here, there is no limit on what could be signed. And I understand what you're trying to do. I'm not disagreeing with the attempt to have, a wonderful State House. I'm disagreeing with the precedent it sets and what's the next thing. Where, as chair of judiciary, could I sign something? I've signed letters to go to the judiciary based upon something the committee has decided.
It's
but
Becky,
not on behalf of pardon?
Well, Becky can clarify this, but the intent really is on behalf of the committee. I mean, this is not meant to be the chair as a rogue operator. It's
It-
meant to be on behalf of the committee.
But
may
I
be,
think
that
what we're
doesn't say
saying
that.
is it's meant on behalf of the entire legislative body.
Yeah.
That we're selecting a review and authority to negotiate a memorandum of understanding between the executive branch and the legislative branch. And the question is this the right structure to do that? It's not,
Yeah.
Senator Sears, it's not disagreeing with the need or the intent here. It has to do with how we assign that ultimate responsibility on behalf of the legislative branch. And I'm going to suggest, we've taken testimony. I think there's a question about limiting the meetings, or if they need to have more, it's with the approval of, the speaker and the pro tem. I don't know. We can work that out. But I think I would like to have an opportunity to discuss with the pro tem the relationship between this document or this agreement that's being negotiated by the legislature and that, say, the Joint Legislative Management Committee, which has broader representation from both the House and the Senate. In this case, I'm not sure, that where the chair will be, and to see if the work would be done, but the final authorization and commitment and the authority, how that should ultimately get defined, I think is really what we're struggling with here. And so I think rather than torturing you more, to be honest, we will have that follow-up discussion, and then we can have further review of the bill.
And Jane, I think Jeanette and I would appreciate being looped in on that if we could.
All right.
Discuss that with you and Becca. That would be great, because we'd be happy to clarify this further. It wasn't meant to.
No, I understand that. And for now, as you say, everything works on relations and
Yes.
relationships. But that doesn't always happen. And there may be some differences of opinion, or you might find that this committee is taking, making decisions. I don't know. You can envision where other people would say, we disagree with that, and what is the right forum here?
Right.
So I think we understand the reason for the bill. We'll probably think about putting in some limits around the committees. And then, because this is to coordinate policy oversight and care of the State House. So this is really, the scope is limited to the actual artwork collection here. Is that correct?
Interior. It's focused on the interior of the State House.
Okay, well, that's much bigger than artwork then.
Well, it's coordinating the policies, the oversight and care of the State House artwork collection. That's really what it's,
Well, I think that's what we're struggling with. In one breath, it seems like it's much more expansive, and the other is, well, is it really the the statues and the artwork on the walls?
Well, the artwork on the walls require BGS sometimes to help with the installation, lighting. These are the players, and it would be great if at this moment, when everyone's working well together, to get them to come into agreement on how to go forward working well together, which is part of why we're trying to seize this moment in time and set a template for how to work together productively going forward, because it sadly has not always worked well.
All right. Well,
So
I think we need to, I'm sorry, Senator Starr.
We have no jurisdiction over any of that stuff. I thought the legislature had some jurisdiction on that.
We do through the Legislative Advisory Committee on the State House. That's your voice in this work. And actually, that's what Ruth said, we need to clarify this, and because it's not clear, and it's not. So this is our work doing that. So then this report was due back last March, and so we're playing a little bit of catch up here.
All right. I guess it's a couple of issues. It's Senator Brewer's concern. That seems to mean that you could proliferate a variety of subcommittees without limit. And because it just says that the committee shall create subcommittees and may also create other subcommittees to advise and carry out other duties. So it seems like there's the what that could evolve in. It's pretty open-ended.
Pretty far reaching.
So I don't think that was necessarily the intent, but that's the way it looks. So you could have like 10 different subcommittees if you wanted to.
Originally, we had set up, in anticipation of the expansion of the State House expansion, we had set up a State House a renovations subcommittee. And so we decided that was premature. And that's in many ways, that's what the whole Legislative Advisory Committee does and would be doing. So we started with the one we need because it is required by the work that was done before and required in the capital bill of 2020. So we needed to create a collections policy. We haven't had one. The last time it was updated was 2007. So this is, we need a collections policy group to be working on it.
Okay, I'm going to suggest we've identified the questions and we need to have some follow-up discussion.
Right.
And you understand what areas that we're
Yeah. No, this is
going to be examining further. And so I'm going to, based on where we are and the questions that have been raised, I don't think the committee is prepared to take any action at this point on the bill until we can sort of get a little more clarity in the areas that we've identified. So I appreciate your coming in and presenting the bill to us. I believe Becky Wasserman had to leave, but I think these are more protocol issues and delegation issues within the legislative branch that we are really focusing on here.
I appreciate.
All right, thank you.
More to follow and happy to help.
All right, thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Okay.
Yeah, I was, could I just make one more comment?
Yeah, certainly.
Part of what the bill talks about is making sure that the art collection is representative, and it lists a number of categories that it should be representative in. I would imagine they're going to have to set up another advisory committee to advise them on that set of aspects. And that won't be ad hoc, because you wouldn't, as that collection changes, you're going to need sign off from that advisory committee. So I think what they're contemplating is a broader structure that will build out over the next couple of years.
Oh,
Yeah.
yeah.
So I think what we're expressing is a certain caution about what are we creating here and what is the potential out into the future. And what is the relationship of that committee with the other legislative committees that have very clearly designated authority relative to legislative
Always
policy?
been the institutions committees that, kind of covered those things.
Yeah, and we, over the years since I've been in Montpelier, we've given our authority away to committees and bureaucrats, and I don't see where it's improved a whole lot. Richie, you've been here almost as long as I have. You've watched that.
I've watched a lot of stuff, but this one, you could create subcommittees of subcommittees.
Mm-hmm. Okay. I think we'll have to figure out how we want to proceed with this without sort of, we've got the bill. We're kind of getting into some of the fundamentals of even what the bill does and how we want to work that out. So I guess we have some more work here. Who does have BGS? although this is a larger policy, I'm on the Legislative Management Oversight Committee. I could at least, and I believe Becca is currently the chair. So my first what I want to do is discuss the relationship between what's being proposed here or would be created here, and then the authority that each group has, and how. The one thing about the legislative management, it is just legislators. This is obviously the committee. And would elect a chair from its legislative members.
So
So,
how much power does that chair have?
well, yeah, I think that's right. Okay, I think, so our next agenda item is.
We have the Vermont fairs,
And they were coming at 2:15.
2:00. They're here right now in the waiting room. And then we have
okay.
Adam and Hardy around 2:15.
Okay, all right.
So I'm going to let them in if that's okay.
Yeah, that would be great.
Here they come.
Jane, I keep getting kicked off, so if I disappear, I'll be back. For some reason, I keep getting a drop.
Huh.
Me too.
Oh, you mean your internet's unstable?
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know if it's the wind or what, but
Yeah.
we'll be going, like I'm back on, it'll 3 minutes,
Okay.
5 minutes.
Well,
But
sometimes
anyway,
if you shut your video off, it helps.
maybe I'll try that.
All right. Sometimes that does help. Okay, Jackie, I see you're here. You have all your folks. Have they all been allowed in?
I think so. I see Dave and Tim and Dick, and actually I'm missing Diane Norris, but maybe she'll pop in. But we can
Okay.
certainly start. I know you have a limited amount of time and I don't want to bump up against your schedule. So thank you very much, Senator Kitchell and committee, for having us in today. Really appreciate you giving us the time to update you very quickly on some of the fairs. And to get right into it, there's Diane. I will let Mr. Lawrence start off. And please keep in mind, folks, that we have 15 minutes. So thank you very much.
Okay.
Good afternoon, Senate Committee and Senator Jane as chair.
Hi, Dick.
Hi, on behalf of Caledonia County Fair, I'm Dick Lawrence, representing the fair for this presentation. We are very thankful for the support that this committee and the individuals on it that have supported us exceptionally strong in retaining stipend money and grant money over the years. The stipend money is generally what we call startup money, but it is used for ribbons, trophies, and cash awards. We get Caledonia County, to give you an example, gets the maximum amount that the stipend award allows, which is 10% of the total, which amounts to approximately $11,000. On the grant fund, again, this capped by a 10% maximum. This past year, we received $30,000. This was used to rebuild a dairy barn that has been tipping, and we propped it as long as we could. And now we've demolished it and put up a new barn that should last us for decades. This coming year, we are going to replace the remaining 2 barns that 3 out of the 5 need replacing. This would be dairy barns. We're going to replace those 2, and we're going to replace it with a single barn. And I'd just like to talk about grant money for just a moment, because it does do what it's intended to do. In our particular case, we were going to take our grant money, which was $30,000, add to it amount of money so that we could put up what we considered a good replacement for the single barn that we intended to replace. Once we got a price on that, we decided, let's look at doing the 2 barns and possibly combining them into one project. So by getting a price for the 2 barns, we were able to save over the 2 projects approximately $20,000 by doing it all at one time. So we went out and looked for a sponsor, and we were lucky in finding one. That sponsor came in with a very generous donation. So what I guess the point that I'm trying to make is we took the state grant money, we added to it fair money, which was basically 3 times the grant money. And then we've got a very large donation to make the whole thing happen in a year. A great example of how the funds we get from the state helps not only the state, but helps the fair and helps our area. Also would like to just comment that the money that we got from the COVID money was used extremely well in keeping us alive for a year, because we do run all of it on very tight budgets. And anything that we had left over has gone into capital projects, including a little bit of that money in this particular project that I've just described. So thank you, Senator. Thank you, members, for supporting us. Questions, I'm sure we would try to answer them at the conclusion.
Who's next, Jackie?
Tim Shea from Champlain Valley Expo.
Okay.
Thanks, Jackie, and thank you to the committee. Tim Shea, Executive Director of the Champlain Valley Exposition, and I'm also the President of the Vermont Fairs and Field Days Association. And I will echo what Mr. Lawrence said, just thanking you with the priorities, with the demands that you folks have on state resources. We appreciate the support that you've given to the fairs and field days over the years, especially the recent years when we've all been hit, like so many, so hard by the pandemic. The additional funds really helped us to kind of hold off those worst case scenarios. Some highlights, what we've done with the funds over the past few years. Again, the stipend funds, as Dick said, it's the startup money, helps with the ribbons, premiums, those kind of fair essentials we must have. On the bigger picture of things, we're all about infrastructure. Our grandstand a couple of years ago, we were notified that we need to install a fire alarm system in it if we want to continue to use it, which we must have. So summer of 2020, we spent about $35,000 and installed a fire alarm system in the grandstand. I think all the fairs have some campgrounds, which is needed for our exhibitors, vendors, and other people that do business at the fair. Again, to keep up with current requirements from an electrical perspective, what we had out there for electrical hookups were probably 30 some odd years old. Last year, we upgraded our water and electric on one of our camping lines. Again, about $35,000. We'll be doing another line this summer. All these dollars, all the capital dollars that we receive from the state are leveraged with our own dollars. And in some instances, like the example I'll give next is our 2 big buildings. If you've been to shows here, we call it Miller North and Miller South. We converted the lighting in that building to LED, using some efficiency Vermont dollars as well. And what's nice about an investment capital project like that is it continues to pay dividends years on as we realize savings in our utility bills. As you can imagine, we have a show going on in there, or our youth soccer programs, those lights are on a significant portion of the day. So the more we can save as far as the energy we're not using allows us to reallocate those dollars somewhere else. Like all fairgrounds, we have a lot of buildings. Some are older than others, and the Vermont State Building is arguably, I think, one of our oldest one on the grounds, and we want to maintain it. And buildings need their roofs replaced. So this summer, we'll be replacing the roof on the Vermont State Building to keep it a vital part of our operation. And the last one, and what's interesting, a lot of these projects are not that exciting, but it's like putting new brakes in your car. You kind of have to do it. The last one is not exciting at all, but it's HVAC units, the heating and air conditioning units on these buildings. Our Miller South, we have 6 of them. We replaced 5 so far, each at about a $26,000 expense. So we've done 5. We're going to do 1 this spring and just keep chipping away at this list of, I say deferred maintenance, but just like any big institution facility, is to protect the asset so it can continue to be a resource to the community. So again, thank you for your time.
Thank you. Next.
Diane Norris is next from Addison.
Hi,
Also,
Diane. Welcome.
thank you very much. I'm Diane Norris. I'm currently the president of Addison County Fair and Field Days. Like Dick, longtime fair volunteer. This is my 37th year on the board. Pretty much what the other guys said is what we do. Our stipend money is, we tend to put 7,500 into our premiums, and the balance we use as startup funds. On the grant side, we've done some major improvements with those funds, going from the camper line upgrade to an electrical rebuild where we installed 20 mini meters on poles. And what that allowed us to do is reduce our electric rate, because we are billed according to the one day that you use the most electricity. So for us, that happens 5 days out of the whole year. So by spreading those out on a variety of meters, the project was a $45,000 project. And we were able to save just this past year about $6,000. So it'll be a very fast payback for us. We did a welcome center building with some funds. It was, we got 32,000 that year. The welcome center in reality cost us about $150,000. So I'd just like to say that without the startup funds from the grant monies, there's no way we could be able to secure loans to do the rest of our projects. So thank you so much for supporting the fairs. It's just so critical to our local community in particular. It's like the event of the summer in our area. And we gather about 32 to 35,000 people for that 5 days, and just a wonderful event, and would love all of you to come down and visit. Thank you for your time.
Thank you for coming today, or Zooming in, I guess.
Thank you, ma'am. So now Dave Martin from the Farm Show. Dave, are you going to hook in here? There we go. Can't hear you, Dave.
There. That
Yeah.
better? There we go.
Yeah.
Thank you. Dave Martin, president of the Vermont Farm Show. The Farm Show is different from some of the other fairs in that we do not get capital grants, because essentially the Farm Show doesn't own anything. Our event occurs at Champlain Valley Expo. We do get a stipend grant, and part of that was the special appropriations that came in this year, resulted in us getting another $26,000. And that was really a lifesaver for us, because our newly hired show manager left for another job, and we ended up contracting with Delaney Event Management to run the show. And that was fairly expensive. And it was the day that check arrived, it was like a real sense of relief, because we've had to cancel 2 of our shows, and the shows are our only income. So that presents a real challenge. The other little thing I'd like to mention is that I think that the Vermont fairs as a whole play a really important role in supporting agriculture in Vermont and getting the message out to the public that agriculture is a vital part of the Vermont economy, and it helps the public understand that, and helps the public understand some of the tremendous Vermont products that are available to purchase. So I think that's one of the things, the ways that Vermont fairs do give back to Vermont. Thank you.
Thank you. That's everyone now, Jackie?
That is, we knew you were stressed for time, so I didn't want to bring a whole crew in like we normally do. So we really appreciate the time that you gave us, and hopefully we'll see you all at the fairs this summer.
Well, that's our hope. Obviously, you know, from our past track record that this one committee has obviously been tried to be a good friend of the fairs and our agricultural tradition. The additional money we gave you because of the impact of COVID obviously was very helpful as well. And so it's nice to hear directly how the fairs have benefited from the resources that we've provided. So thank you. Let's hope for a good sugaring season this year, and that the summer will bring back our fairs again. So thank you, Jackie, for coordinating your members here today, and good seeing you all.
Thank you very much, Senator Kitchell. Goodbye. Thank you for the rest of the committee for your support.
Thank you.
Mhm.
Bye.
So here's Commissioner Gresham. He doesn't look like a fair manager to me.
I could be if I change clothes.
Oh, you probably could. Okay, so we're going on to a presentation on the 23 budget. And I know you've got a number of your staff here. Did I see Holly was on and then left? Jason is here. So I'm going to leave it to you to take it in terms of your presentation, Commissioner.
Sure. Thank you, Madam Chair. And also joining me is our Budget Director, Hardy Merrill, and he and I will tag team, and the folks from AOA Financial Services Division will be here in case we get stumped. So we've got a full complement. So thank you
Okay.
much for hearing us through. Adam Gresham, Commissioner of Finance and Management. And we sent through a PDF that is probably best to go through. I was going to start on page 4 of that document with the Agency of Administration. So there's 2 documents, one for Finance and Management and one for the Agency of Administration. I was going to start with the agency.
Do you want screen sharing or do you want Chrissy to put it up, or how do you want to proceed?
I can just tell you the page I'm on, and I think people should have it on their computers. Chrissy, did you distribute it to the members?
I did distribute to the members. It's also posted on our website, but I can certainly screen share it if that is helpful to the committee.
Well, for me to find it, I've got to go through all my emails.
Okay.
And
So
that'll
we
take
can
about
screen
20
share.
minutes.
Let's share it.
Okay, thank you, Chrissy.
I
So
don't know,
going to,
everybody's using Ricker Pond. I just think it's so beautiful.
that particular shot, I think, is really a stunner.
Yeah.
So going to page 4, Chrissy, if you wouldn't mind.
Oop,
There we go.
you know
I
what?
am, it's the one at the top on the
It's your
screen.
pie chart there.
Yeah, that's right.
It tells where your money comes from and why we should give
Exactly.
it to you.
I'm going to have to go out into the email real quick because when I uploaded it, it made this very small. So if you'll give me one moment, I'll just grab it from my inbox. I'm not
All
sure why
right.
that happened, but I have it here.
So as a general overview, I'm afraid I don't have a lot of excitement compared to an agricultural fair. But the agency
Well,
did have a couple of new things that I wanted to point out. But the
Well, Adam, you do know we do love our fairs and we have supported them. And we see them as
Sure.
part of our agricultural tradition. I know that there's always emphasis on, the newest and the brightest and the best or the shiniest, but they are just part of our agricultural tradition. And when you think about, Tunbridge Fair or any of the others, it's just something that we want to support. So here we are. You want 8 exempt staff and 13 classified positions.
Indeed. So the agency central office has 8 exempts, and I think you have all met most, if not all of them. That includes the secretary, Kristen Clauser, and the deputy, Doug Farnham, as well as the estimable Melissa Maza-Paquette, who is the private secretary and keeps the trains running on time. It also includes newly appointed the chief performance officer, Justin Kenny, as well as Susanna Davis, the director of racial equity, and Monica Hutt, former Dale commissioner, currently the chief prevention officer. As well, there is a staff attorney that is part of that mix that works down in risk management. And finally, there is one open position, the chief the chief operational officer, formerly Doug Farnham. He has been promoted to the deputy's role, so that position is open. So those are the 8 exempt staff that are currently in there. The only new position is the Chief Operations Officer position that was created during Secretary Young's tenure, not in fact over the past year.
And that's under, did you say that's under recruitment?
That's correct. It's currently vacant. It's under recruitment. So there are.
So I want to ask you something while you're here. And that is, how are our efforts to look at accountability? We've got Chief Performance Officer. We have all these data and information. How does that work and effort inform your budget requests?
So, and that's a good question. As you're aware, going back to, gosh, I don't know, a decade ago with results-based accountability and moving forward, we have filled out what we call performance measure budgets. And you see those on the following pages, actually after this page. We report on various programs within our budget, and the effort, it continues to put more, in fact, all of those programs that we do into a budget and ultimately present to you a budget that is programs and not departments and agencies. So how does that inform our budgeting? At this point, we use it as a supplement to, but not the main input to how we budget. And we are moving in the direction of making that our main input, but we have not gotten there yet.
All right, questions about the page?
So I did want to.
The two new positions, the Racial Equity Advisory Panel, which is, that's Susanna is heading that up?
That's correct.
Okay.
One of those positions actually has recently been hired. A woman named Shalini, and I'm afraid I would do a very bad job of pronouncing her last name. But she actually is in-house and she's working with Susanna, and there is one more position that will be hired. The payment for those positions is a small story that I'll get to in a minute. But I did want to just review for the committee that the Secretary's office has a number of different funding streams, probably the largest of which is the internal service funds. Risk management is billed out through a risk management internal service fund, and racial equity is also billed out through the DHR, Department of Human Resources Internal Service Fund. That's a little less than half the Secretary's budget. There's also a very small special fund component, which is the money that goes to the municipal water districts through the Clean Water Fund. And then there's a larger component, an internal interdepartmental transfer. That's how our friends at the agency's financial services division are paid, as well as the chief prevention officer. That also goes through IDT. And finally, there's a general fund component, a little over $1 million, and that is how we pay the secretary, the deputy, the private secretary, the chief performance officer, as well as the chief operations officer. So there's a kind of a compilation of different funding sources, but predominantly IDP, internal service fund, and general.
Questions or pretty straightforward?
So I wanted to then, Chrissy, move to, I figured the best thing to do is just to move to the ups and downs, and I can point out a couple of.
Before you go up and down.
Sure.
Yes, Senator Sears.
Could you just describe what the chief operations officer does?
So formerly that job was held by Doug Farnham, and he had his hand in 4 or 5 different pies. He probably more often than not in the past 2 years was dealing with ARPA and making sure that we were correctly accounting for and dealing with Guidehouse, making sure that what we did met federal eligibility requirements. But he also deals with hiring. statewide. He's one of 3 members of the position pool committee with me and Beth Fastiggi. He also deals some of the more administrative tasks within the office, making sure they have enough paper clips, making sure people have support. So the job is meant to range kind of far and wide, but I would say it's probably the chief business officer within that agency.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Any other questions? It's hard to see, so speak up. If not, we'll
So-
move to the ups and downs.
And what page are the
Okay.
ups and downs?
On page 8, Chrissy, please. Perfect. I think that was it. Yep. So here again, there's not a ton of interest, but there are 2 areas that I would point to. First is if you look partway down under change in other personal services, you'll see an increase of $119,000. That is the chief operations officer position that is now going to be budgeted for. It's kind of a job that's new to the department. And so that is now in the budget. That's an increase of a little under $120,000. And then 2 lines below that, you'll see a decrease of $250,000 and a commensurate increase in the human services internal service fund, human resources internal service fund. And that gets to the racial equity folks. And that's a bit of a story. You'll remember last year when we first submitted the governor's recommended budget, we had included that amount, $250,000, as a one-time payment, general fund. And we did that not because our intention was to make it one time, but because when those positions were settled on and the governor gave it the green light, by then it was late in the budget cycle and we'd already dialed in our internal service funds. And we'd already allocated them out to the departments. So what we did was we put that amount for those 2 racial equity employees in a one-time DEPT ID. And we told you folks that we next year would insert them into the internal service fund, human resources, and build them out. When the budget got past the finish line and ended on the governor's desk, those positions were actually just put into general fund. Instead of one time, they were put into base general fund. So what we're doing here is we're removing them, $250,000 down in general fund, and we're putting them in the human resources internal service fund. So that's why you see the reduction in general fund and increase in ISF. It's a net neutral movement, but I did want to explain it. But that also gives you the, I would say, misleading impression that the overall general fund is down for the agency. Where technically it is down, but that's because we moved those 2 positions into the internal service.
Why did you do that?
Well, so the thought is that these positions will be serving government statewide. I mean, what we're trying to do is adopt a statewide approach to human resources and diversity, equity, and inclusion, rather than build small or not so small silos in individual departments, agencies, and departments.
No, I was just talking about the switch in the funding. Did you need to free up general fund to get
No,
for something
because
else?
the original intention was to do that, and because we arrived at these positions too late in the cycle, figuring out internal service funds is very, you're aware, it's just a mathematical puzzle, not high math, but just a big puzzle, figuring out what your total spend is and then figuring out how to apportion that amount to departments. So we generally do that early in the budget cycle. And so come end of December, we're locked in with internal service funds. It would take an act of God to make us reopen them and redo them. So for these 2 positions, we decided that we would simply put them in a one-time general fund depth ID, and then the next year we would integrate them into general service.
Well, I certainly understand they're supporting a lot of state government. I tend to think of human resources as more staffing, and it seems to me their role is so much broader than that. I guess reviewing regulations and policies to make sure that that there isn't an inherent bias or depending on the task at hand. So I don't necessarily dispute that the value and the work and the benefit of that expertise extends to all of state government. So
Right.
that isn't my question. It was just the swap in the funding, because some of those aren't some of those it seems like I'm looking at back to the pension issue. Some of those funding sources are in fact tapped out for those kinds of administrative charges.
That's correct. And, it's not to say that the timing was perhaps less than perfect in that we've got pressures in our internal service funds for other things. So, I would acknowledge that we weren't, overjoyed to put another $250,000 into internal service funds. But, we wanted to make sure that all human resources folks, and these people are predominantly working with human resources in the same place. So, we just didn't see any better place to put it.
All right,
So those are-
questions?
Sorry, go ahead.
That's it?
Oh,
Yeah, I mean, that's,
why aren't these two groups, why aren't they all in human resources? I should think they would blend together if they're dealing with all the employees, of the state.
Well, they aren't really in that way. I don't think, Senator Starr, they really are looking at our personnel policies, probably hiring practices, recruitment, the ways in which we had that example. I believe it was the issue of a Somali who wanted to be the state trooper, and the way the test was constructed created problems for because of the cultural differences. So I think it's more along larger systems and policy and other practices that the focus of this group is on, as opposed to down at the individual employee level. But maybe you can expand on that, Adam, if I'm not doing it justice.
No, you are, in fact, but I'd also point out that, the director of racial equity too is billed out through DHR. So these two people would be working directly with her. So, it was really, we should all have them in one spot.
Yeah. And I think we did that.
Right. So we're just following commands or rules.
Just for total transparency.
Right.
But then the value of that position and then the work just kept and the potential of where work needed to be done just made it way beyond one person to manage. Okay. I don't think we want to spend much time on your $454, but if somebody wants to, they can speak up now. But otherwise, I'm going to suggest we move into your next, into your financial services division.
And the only excitement there, I will say, and keep in mind, these are all IDTs, so you don't see any general fund there. The only excitement there I would point to is the change in other personal services. There's a little over $100,000, $103,000 down there. And that is due really to utilizing fund balance. Had less expenditures than anticipated, and also keep in mind there was some CRF, coronavirus relief fund money that was factored in some of the work that they did, which saved general fund or saved the internal service funding. So they were able to use that fund balance to decrease the overall cost. So that's why you see that down of $103,000. Everything else is pretty standard, just your basic wage pressures and benefit pressures and the like. And
This is the first year you've added that column to the right where you're having to categorize each expenditure.
Yes, it just gives us an idea of what category fits in, and in case anyone asks, you know, of the governor's priorities, what are you investing and how much, we can answer it just by adding them up, and it provides some format for us to do that.
Okay, questions? I don't see anyone or hear anyone. Pretty straightforward.
So I was going to suggest, Chrissy, if you would flip to the next page, and I was going to yield the floor to my colleague, our budget director, Hardy Merrill.
Thank you, Adam. And for the record, Hardy Merrill, Director of Budget and Management Operations for the Department of Finance and Management. I've got a message on my screen that I'm not able to start my video because the host has stopped it. So perhaps I didn't meet the dress code, but I'm happy to show my show my
That's
face.
a possibility, Hardy.
If I'm turned back on. I'll walk through. Oh, there I am. So I'll walk the committee through the risk management sections.
Oh my gosh,
AOA.
you've got a $6 up here. I'd like to spend at least an hour on that one. Oh, I'm no,
There's a
just
story
kidding.
behind that, Madam Chair.
I bet there's got to be. It's like the $1 for the Morgan Horse Farm.
Yeah.
Well, anyway, I'm glad to know it's a structural statewide pressure.
So I can't speak specifically to the $6 line, but I would like to talk a little bit bigger picture about our risk management budgets. So the first thing I wanted to remind the committee is that the portions of the risk management budgets that we are reviewing as part of the budget presentation are what are referred to typically as the non-demand portions of each insurance line. So for workers' comp, which is the first section we see on page 9 of 53, this $946,000 is what's referred to as the non-demand part of the workers' comp budget. And what that refers to is these are somewhat more of the discretionary administrative expenses. So the staff costs for administering the program. We've also got some contract administration for audit and actuary services that are in there, and basic overhead for managing workers' compensation. What this does not show is the $13.1 million in FY23, which represents the demand side of the equation, which refers to the costs associated with paying claims for workers' compensation. So the state is actually budgeting and billing out to all departments through the workers' comp ISF, not $946,000 shown here, but a total of $14 million. So I first just wanted to set the stage with an explanation of that aspect of how the budget's constructed.
Hardy, let me ask, that distribution or allocation of the cost of claims. If you have a department that isn't managing injuries well, and you're getting an excessive volume of claims from that one department or that one agency, does everybody have to pony up? How is that cost allocated, that 13 million?
So that's a great question. And the allocation involves some different inputs and number of staff positions being a big one. But I would ask, in terms of your question, I think, is whether there's sort of an experience rating by department, so that
yeah.
depending on your experience, and I believe that there is, to explain the formula, I'm actually not, that's not in my wheelhouse. I'm not sure if Sean Benham from FSD is on the call, or someone else from FSD might be able to add a little color.
Sure, Hardy, thank you. Sean Benham, Financial Director 2 with the AOA Financial Services Division. Yeah, simply put, yes, experience as well as exposure are both factored in. The ratios are set by an actuarial firm. That's one of our vendors that we contract with. They do look at a history of claims experience and then try to normalize it to use that to help smaller departments. If there's one big bad claim in a small department, they try not to, they don't blow up the budget to incorporate that, but they smooth out the history of it, as well as then look at exposure and job payroll and job class. So yes, definitely. The short answer is yes, it's factored in.
Okay. Other questions?
Yeah.
I
Thanks
know
very-
managing and preventing injuries. I mean, that's, such an important aspect of employment. It's sort of like, the single state audit, and so to speak, and how seriously departments take that, those findings. And I was just wondering for workers' comp, if there was kind of that feedback loop to the areas where they need to focus more on injury prevention.
But don't they just come back to us and get the extra money if it didn't we get a report from the corrections department on their workers' comp costs going up recently?
With their budget?
Yeah, I thought their worker comp thing was up quite a bit. Maybe Dick, I don't know if he's on, but anyways, it's fine that it goes to the area where, or the department where the cost is.
Yeah, well, there was some adjustment or for worker comp claim. You're right, Bobby. I can't just recall the specifics of it. Was it in the BAA, Adam?
Yeah, I think so.
So
I think it was BAA.
So I
Yes,
think
Hardy?
we may be combining a few different issues here with the discussion of workers' comp. First of all, if DOC is faced with a very large budget pressure due to workers' comp, that may be the case. I can't speak to it specifically, but since we are up 4% statewide with our combined demand and non-demand workers' comp costs, if corrections is leading the state, for instance, in terms of having more experience, in terms of more claims, then their share of that could be quite a bit more than 4%. And on a department DOC size, it could be very large. So that's one issue. I think the other issue that I just heard mentioned was there something in BAA for worker related to workers' comp? And actually, I believe it's not the BAA, but the big bill. We proposed a transfer in the governor's recommended budget in the D section of $6 million to offset a deficit that is projected to exist at the end of FY22.
Okay, that's what we're thinking of.
And actually, we thought the big bill was a better vehicle than BAA because what the actual deficit turns out to be will depend some on how claims pan out for the balance of fiscal 22. So we'll have a more accurate number that can be determined by the time the big bill's actually passed. But what I will point out is that that $6 million is not related to FY22 or FY23. That is related to prior experience of claims exceeding the amount that we had collected and reserved to pay claims. And so we're trying to true up a pre-existing deficit with that. I'll take a pause there if there are any other questions on work comp.
Well, thank you. I think that's exactly what we were
Yeah.
thinking of.
Okay. So, so what I will do on the ups and downs on page 9, I just, this is basically current services. There are just a couple changes related to cost allocations that are being made in the FY23 budget. So I just wanted to point those out. In work comp, where you see a reallocation of director of risk management from 75 to 34%. What's happening here is that previously the director of risk management salary was budgeted 75% to the workers' comp debt ID and 25% to the state liability debt ID. And nothing of any staff was being allocated to the all other insurances debt ID, which is shown on page 10. So this budget is proposing a 3-way split, a third to each of those insurance areas. So that's why we're seeing this down where it was formerly 75% in workers' comp. It's really just truing up a better allocation of that salary. The other thing we've got that you can see going on in terms of it's really a change in allocation of cost. There's a large down of $122,000 in the state liability section. And what that is a transfer of a staff attorney 3 position, which was formerly housed and paid out of AOA and state liability, and moving that job to the AGO's office, which is really more appropriate since what that job is. So what that means is that job will be paid via an MOU with the AGO, and it will be paid not out of this part of the budget, the non-demand portion, but rather it'll be paid out of the demand side. And since this job is occupied with defending claims primarily, it makes sense to pay it out of the portion of the budget associated with paying claims. So that's the mechanics of what's going on here. I'll take a pause if there are any questions. Those are the 2 factors I really thought needed to be pointed out.
So where does the cost of the MOU for that position
Great.
show then?
So again, so for, as I explained with workers' comp, there's another.
Is it that 13 million? It's
for
part of
workers'
that?
comp, that's the non-demand side. For general liability, it's actually a $6.3 million in addition to the 545,000 you see here. So it's out of that 6.3 million that the MOU would be paid. So what I do want to also mention is that the state liability insurance program, which like workers' comp is self-funded. So we're our own insurance company. We collect and then from all our departments, and then we pay out the claims. We pay actuaries to manage and we pay claims administrators, but we're the carrier, so to speak. And we saw a very significant increase in what the actuaries are telling us we need to reserve for the state's general liability. So in FY22, 5 million was set aside for the demand side of liability, and that's up to 6.3 million being recommended in the governor's recommended budget, and that's based on actuarial calculations. So that's a 25% increase. So that's one of the ISF pressures. The allocations for liability ISFs are one of the significant pressures the departments are seeing statewide in this budget. And yes, that salary will be paid out of that portion of the budget. I'll take a pause there.
Well, it's not a new cost. It's where you're reflecting the cost.
It's just where we're reflecting it. But the point I did want to make is that we've got this very significant increase of 25% in the amount that we're being told by the actuaries we need to set aside based on our liability experience.
So we have stop loss coverage though, don't we? Even though we're self-insured.
We have excess liability.
Yeah.
Yes. We have excess liability policies that cover above
right.
the portion
that
we insure. But we have, but I think the takeaway, I can't speak for sort of the underlying causes and factors per se, but I can say that I'm generally aware that liability claims experience has been what's driving that actuarial recommendation
sure.
to set aside additional. So there's greater liability exposure right now for the state.
And could you tell
Yes,
us how
Bobby?
much is in that account, the account that we've got to bump up? Do you know what the total amount of dollars that's sitting in that liability account?
Senator Starr, I know we've been running close to balance on that.
So
But we're not in the hole like we were with workers' comp.
It's been up and down. There's not as certainly that magnitude of deficit situation, such as for the workers' comp. However, we're being advised to reserve 25% more in the upcoming fiscal year based on concern for claims expenses.
but the payouts are running pretty even with what's in that account. So
Well, I
there's
guess
no-
if you don't make that adjustment, that 25%, you're running the risk of not having adequate reserves.
Yeah.
I think that's probably what we're hearing here based on the actuary recommendation. Okay, other questions about state liability? I think not. Okay.
Okay, and so I'll move on to page 10 for the ups and downs, which is the all other insurance section. So this is just showing the reallocation of the director of risk management salary, and it's also more accurately reflecting our broker services, which were not previously being allocated to all other insurance. So all other insurance includes there are property and flood policies, the cyber liability policy that we're concerned about, that we included some funding in the BAA in the governor's recommended BAA, since our deductibles are greatly increasing. And the one other comment I'd make on the all other insurance is that along with recommending the $6 million transfer in the GovRec big bill for workers' comp to offset a deficit, we're also recommending $1 million for all other insurance. And that's directly the result of primarily two factors. So one is that after we had set the FY22 budgeted amount for all other insurance, we had, and the bill was passed in July, was when our renewal of a number of policies actually took effect. And we had some surprises, one being about a $500,000 increase in the cost of the cyber liability insurance, even though they were offering less coverage. And then there were also increases in excess liability. I believe it was the non-tort excess liability, along with some claims costs associated with some prior year cyber liability claims that were a smaller magnitude. But so those actual costs that we had to pay for the insurance policies in FY22 was about $1 million higher than what we budgeted and collected via the ISFs. So that's not shown on this sheet, but I thought it was worth explaining in a bit further detail that transfer to the fund. So I'll pause there if there are any other insurance related questions.
I'm looking, I can only see 2 members of my committee, so anyone speak up?
Is that only 2 members still awake, or?
Well, you got to admit, it's riveting. It's riveting.
I know insurance. Insurance is not the most always exciting
It's
topic.
right up there with pensions.
But it's big dollars and something been tasked with at various points in my career being being engaged in. So I'll pause there.
Okay, I'm looking. Any questions, committee? We've been asking them kind of as we've gone along. Senator Sears?
No, I have no
Oh,
question.
okay, okay.
It was riveting testimony that was very clear.
Uh-huh. So Brenda, you're back again today. Is there anything you want to offer today?
Well,
I guess
Madam
not.
Chair, I might
Yes.
recommend if you think AOA was exciting, wait till you get to Department of Finance and Management.
Is that
That's what I
next?
was going to say, for sure.
Uh-huh. All right, shall we start?
Yeah. So, wow, Chrissy, that was fast. Thank you. So here, actually, you know, we can take a look at the ups and downs too, but I think you'll find there's not a lot there to look at. Within finance and management, as you're aware, we're part of the agency. Our job is to kind of get a budget together with the governor and work with him to do that and then advocate for it. Our funding stream is predominantly internal service fund. That's because financial operations, whose job it is to implement the budget and track it, they are paid through the Vision Internal Service Fund. As well, a third of my salary and Hardy's is paid through Vision, and the other 2/3 is paid through the general fund. So the general fund
Is that
component,
determined by SWICAP?
It's actually determined more by a kind of division of where our labor goes. I don't think SWICAP is involved with that.
Oh, okay,
It's
just was wondering.
we just look at kind of how our labor is allocated, and I spend some of my time with Vision and most of my time with Vantage, really, the budgeting system, and you know, working with the governor's office. So the issue, I mean, total finance and management general fund is up barely I think it's actually 0.9%. That's a little bit misleading because our Vision expenditures are up a bit more, largely through just basically wage and internal service fund pressures with the folks in FinOps. So the overall increase department-wide, if you include general fund, Vision, and everything, is about 3.3 or 3.2%. Still quite modest, but nonetheless, a little bit misleading to say that we're, you know, up less than 1%. But in terms of general fund, that is in fact what it is. And, you know, I would say the story within our department is actually one that's probably top of mind to anyone that's looking what's going on out there, the general economy. We're in a what I would call a changeover phase as I speak. We have an opening in the deputy position, which shortly will be filled. We also have 3 analysts who have either departed or about to depart. So we are recruiting those 3 positions. And in addition, downstairs in the financial operations area, we're looking for a new director of statewide reporting. John
What
Becker.
about Ellen's position?
That is filled by a gentleman named Joe Harris. So that position is filled, and his position actually has been also filled, but we've just had a fair amount of musical chairs. But the John Becker position, he's the director of statewide reporting, and his job is to do the formerly known as CAPR every year. And so that is a position we're currently recruiting. That's proved to be challenging to find. It's a very detailed position. We typically hire a CPA. It's been a challenge, but in general, we are kind of in a restocking. In the budget office, I would say, however, the silver lining there is that of our 3 analysts that have departed, 2 of them will stay within state government. You know, finance and management has often been and continues to be a training ground for other areas. So one of our analysts, Candace Elmquist, who you may have met, she is now, I don't know if you remember Jill Gould at Human Services, who was in charge of federal funds at Human Services. Candace has moved over to take her job. And Matt Sutter, who is still with us through the end of this month, but he will be moving to the Green Mountain Care Board to take an analytical role with them. The only sad part is that Mike Middleman, who is just has been a rock star for us and was really provided a lot of the analytical input to our PAYGO proposal, as well has tracked the treasurer's office and been point on pensions. He's actually moving to Florida, which there's not much I can do about that. Anyway, I personally believe that it's a win if we bring bright people into state government and they stick around. If not in our office, in other offices around state government, I think that's great. And so, you know, finance and management has perennially been kind of a training ground for people who go on and do great things, including many people that you know, Bradley.
And some of them actually came over to the other branch.
Right. So anyway, but we are in a rebuilding phase, but nonetheless, we're getting the work out there. One kind of thing I'd like to brag about is every year our ACFR wins an award from the GFOA for solid presentation, meeting all the requirements of a.
So could you tell us GFOA?
Yes, the Government Financial. I don't know what the OA stands for. I should. It's an oversight board for government reporting and accounting.
I see.
And this year, we our big budget book, the big 1,600-page book, we presented for the first time and were awarded the GFOA award distinction. It was a win for us. It's something that our ACFR has won every year for the past 10 years. And we thought it was high time to bring the rest of us up to speed. So anyway, we're doing what we need to do. But we're currently in a rebuilding phase. One project that, as you're aware, is upcoming that weighs heavily on all of our minds is the replacement of our accounting and budgeting systems. Our budgeting system is called Vantage. It's what we use when we draw up a budget and what various field departments use when they enter their budgets. And our larger system for accounting and statewide reporting is called Vision. That's an off-the-shelf Oracle product. Those two systems will be replaced when we move to a statewide ERP system. That's going to be a big job. In many ways, I look forward to it. It's always nice to have the latest software, but in many other ways, I realize it's going to be a big project. So we're just starting down that road. But we anticipate over the next 2 years, this is going to go from plan to reality. So we're cognizant of that. Are there
That's
questions
the end of your
on
summary and highlights. Do you have another sheet you want us to?
We have the ups and downs. Like I said, there's really not a lot to them. But
I wouldn't think
in the
so.
spirit of transparency, I'll show you on page. It would be on page 9, Chrissy. I really don't have a lot to highlight here, but I was going to hand it over to Hardy in case he wanted to highlight more.
Thank you, Adam. I'll just make a few comments. So on the top half of the page, the FinOps financial operations section, which is 100% funded via the Vision Internal Service Fund. That 2.988 million represents an up of 4.8%. And as you can see, it's really driven by salary and benefit cost increases. What I will add to Adam's sort of discussion of staff turnover is that we're likely to come in at certainly less than this amount for FY23, because when the budget was put together, it was done so based on existing staff, including Ruth Ellen Doyen and John Becker, and their salary rates based on their years of experience. So we're likely to, we either have or are likely to replace positions at lower rates than they were at, just based on the nature of where positions start in the step range. So I was just going to offer that comment on the FinOps budget. It's current services with no programmatic changes. And also the Director of Statewide Reporting, John Becker's former job, is currently creating savings by being vacant as well. On the lower half of the page, the Budget and Management Division, which is the division of which I serve as the director and have a team of 5 to 6 analysts working with me in the division, although currently, we're soon to be down to a level of just 2, as Adam mentioned. The key points I wanted to make here is, as you can see, it's about a third charged out to the internal service fund, the same vision fund, and 2/3 general funded. The commissioner, the deputy commissioner, and the private secretary position are funded 50-50, actually, with general fund and internal service fund. That's the exact fund split. And then we have 3 analyst positions that are charged 1/3 to the Vision ISF, and that's justified based on the fact that they serve with a portion of their time as the system administrators for the Vantage budget system that Adam alluded to. And yes, we are showing a budget that's only up 0.9%. I'll make the same on the general fund side. I'll make the same comment that I did with financial operations. And since we're needing to replace highly tenured analyst staff with more junior employees, our actual rates that we're hiring at are likely to be lower than those in the current budget. So I expect to see savings on both the upper and lower halves of this, of the ups and downs. That's about all I had to comment on these.
Questions? It's just, we've gone through the ups and downs now.
Nope.
Anything else?
Nothing that I have in my back pocket, Madam Chair. I'm sorry to say.
Is there something we should have asked you that you didn't want us to ask you?
Not really. Like I said, our budgets are pretty standard.
I know they are. They are pretty straightforward. I don't want to use the term boring, but sometimes boring is good.
I think in this case it is. I mean, again, we're in a rebuilding phase across the department. I think AOA, the Secretary's office, I think they went through that, and last year, they created the Chief Operations Officer position. They hired one of the 2 Director of Racial Equity positions. So they're a little bit ahead of us in that regard.
Okay. Anything else? I don't think so.
Good.
Then Chrissy, I think this is the last budget testimony for today.
That is correct.
Okay, so with that, what I'm going to do is adjourn the committee for today.